I'm very pleased for us to be moving on to our next plenary, International Reparations Movements, and we're very pleased to be joined all the way from Jamaica, but online, by Professor Verene Shepherd, who is the Vice Chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission and the Vice Chair of the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. It's a good morning to you, Professor Shepherd.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm glad to be here.
Well, we're very eager to hear from you.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
is it my turn to start now?
It is your turn. My apologies. I think you hadn't heard our introduction. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Yes, all right then. So greetings, everyone. I have to express my deep admiration for you, Honorable Bell Ribera Addy, and all the reparations advocates in the UK who are standing on the right side of history and linking with other local, regional, and international organizations, state and non-state, including the CARICOM Reparations Commission, to advance this vital social justice, anti-racism, and anti-colonial work. And I was very surprised to hear someone say that you're not working with CARICOM. You are working with CARICOM. There was a gathering in the Netherlands recently, and some people from the UK were there. They know who they are, and they can say, actually sponsored by CARICOM. Anyway, the reparations movement is clearly a global 21st century movement now. What started as a grassroots movement now incorporates individual states, groups of states like CARICOM and the African Union. And we already know that at the July AU CARICOM summit, the focus was on reparations. And this year, I think the AU says it's the year for reparations. How successfully it will be done, we don't know, but we have to get involved. Just over the last 2 years alone, and this is a point I'm making about the internationalization, I think I've been invited to speak on one aspect or the other of reparations in Ghana, South Africa, Thailand, Ethiopia, Germany, the UK. Some of you came to Leicester and Bristol, the USA and Switzerland. But it also transcends state borders and is international in another sense. And June, I think, spoke about or referred to some of those spaces. It is now of great concern to UN treaty bodies, special procedures, and other UN mechanisms. At the level of the UN, we know that since the Durban Conference, support from various secretaries general, high commissioners for human rights, mechanisms of special procedures of the Human Rights Council, at the Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent, and the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent, as well as treaty bodies like the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, on which I serve as CARICOM's representative, have embraced reparations as central to their anti-racism agenda. Believe me, it was not always so. And some of you know this too, because some of you have been coming to Geneva for some time. When I joined CERD in 2016, for example, I was the lonely voice shouting reparations, but it is now everywhere we turn. And what I want to do is to give you some examples from the work of the anti-racism bodies, the treaty bodies, because that's part of the internationalization of the movement, because we interact with states, and there are 182 of them who are members of CERD. So the latest work that we have done is on a general recommendation on reparations. And I can't believe that we're here between 2016 and 2025. We have now landed here. GR 40 on reparations is in an advanced state of completion and will be ready soon for public use. Now, also, every examination of states parties involves discussions on the rights of minorities and indigenous peoples, including the right to reparations and the social justice rights enshrined in the International Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. We also invoke General Recommendation number 23 of 1997 on the rights of indigenous peoples and the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And for example, under Article 26(1) of the UN DRIP, indigenous peoples have the right to the lands, territories, and resources which they have traditionally owned, occupied, or otherwise used or acquired. And when we talk about indigenous peoples, we're not only talking about the people, the first peoples in the Americas, there are indigenous peoples in Africa. And when African states come to us, we do ask about the situation of indigenous peoples and wherever they live. Many of them are Africans, many of them are a mixed people, but there are indigenous peoples. And so that convention must be, that declaration must be invoked. Then I turned to the United Kingdom, and I saw many NGOs there when the UK came before the CERD in August last year. I wish to summarize the concerns and recommendations in the concluding observation, which is now a public document on the CERD webpage. You can go and look at it if you haven't done so before. And the concluding observation reflect the committee's concerns with two social justice issues for which repair is urgent or is being demanded: the treatment of the Windrush generation in the UK and the lingering effects of colonialism and the transatlantic trafficking in African people. Both issues affect people of African descent who live in the UK because our history is not dead. It lives on in harmful legacies. I'm aware that these topics have been raised by previous speakers here, but as a vice chair of CERD, I feel obliged to add our concerns to those already raised. So first, the Windrush generation. What were the concerns expressed by the CERD? So this is an international issue now, right? So the committee expressed concern about the profound negative impact of the hostile environment, legislation, and policies adopted by the state party on persons belonging to the Windrush generation and their descendants, who were systematically detained, denied legal rights, prevented from traveling abroad, threatened with forcible removal, and in many cases deported, thereby losing their access to housing, healthcare, and bank accounts. Furthermore, their health and well-being were deeply damaged, and the committee was particularly concerned that the recommendations made in the Windrush Lessons Learned Review of 2020 have only been partially implemented, and that some key recommendations will not be implemented by the state party. And we benefited so much from the NGOs, grassroots people who came there to talk to the committee. And this is one of the things you must do when your state comes before the CERD. Come to Geneva, make sure that you're there to talk to us. Then in terms of the recommendations, one recommendation, and I just read the recommendation as it is in the COPS. The committee recommends that the state party accept and implement all the recommendations made in the Windrush Lessons Learned Review of 2020. It also recommends that the state party adopt all measures necessary to ensure that all Windrush generation victims have fair, prompt, and effective access to justice, including adequate reparations. It further recommends that the state party simplify the Windrush compensation scheme. Now, I want to turn now to the lingering effects of colonialism and the transatlantic trafficking, because we were interested in this and we heard a lot from the NGOs who briefed us. So this is the concern, these are some of the concerns raised. The committee notes the initiatives in the state party relating to the history of the British Empire and its role in colonialism and trafficking in enslaved Africans, including an independent review of the school curriculum in England with the overall aim of ensuring that it is rich, broad, inclusive, and innovative, and the mandatory teaching of Black, Asian, and minority ethnic histories and experiences in the school curriculum in Wales. However, the committee remains concerned about the lack of adequate incorporation of balanced accounts of the history of colonialism and chattel enslavement in the British Empire into school curricula across the state party's jurisdiction. And I know that somebody said earlier on, it's not only about the curriculum, but I know when I was in England some years ago that Saturday schools were still going on, where the history is taught from the perspective of Black people. But the committee was also concerned, and still is concerned, about the lingering legacies of colonialism, racial and chattel enslavement, which continue to fuel racism, intolerance, racial stereotypes, and racial discrimination in the state party, undermining the full enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms by ethnic minorities, in particular, people of African descent. And we use Articles 5, 6, and 7 of the convention to push the state to honor its obligations. So in terms of recommendations on this topic, the committee recommends that the state party redouble its efforts to acknowledge past wrongs and raise awareness of the legacies and impacts of colonialism and the trafficking in enslaved people and their connection with present-day manifestations of systemic racism in close consultation with relevant stakeholders, in particular people of African descent. June has said nothing about us without us, just reinforce that. Another recommendation reads like this: adequately reflecting school curricula in all its jurisdictions the history of colonialism, trafficking in enslaved Africans, and chattel enslavement in the British Empire. And also consider making a formal apology for its role in chattel enslavement and the historic trafficking in enslaved Africans, and adopt special measures or specific measures to address their lasting consequences and commitments to reparation. And you can read the rest of the recommendations. But I must say that the state was also asked to ensure that there is education around the issues in schools. For example, they should adequately reflect in school curricula in all its jurisdictions. And I want to emphasize that. The history of colonialism, trafficking in enslaved Africans, and chattel enslavement in the British Empire. And then this preoccupation with education is not only a concern of CERD. When the working group came there in 2012, and I led that, and when they came back recently, this was also a concern. The concern was with whose story is being told in the schools in the UK and how accurately they have been told or are they being told, because according to the working group in the recent report, several students reported a spike in racial slurs and bullying after positive efforts such as Black History Month. So you see that education is not something that is only confined to what happens in the classroom. It's about its impact in the society. And yet, as you know, we have the UK Commission report on race and ethnic minorities, which pushed a false narrative about the slavery era, as in, and I quote, the making of modern Britain teaching resources or response to negative calls for decolonizing the curriculum. There is a new story about the Caribbean experience, which speaks to the slave period not only being about profit and suffering, but how culturally African people transformed themselves into a remodeled African Britain. Well, that is not their business. That's not what we are doing to refashion ourselves is not their business. Their business is to ensure that the story is told properly. So as I soon end, just give me a couple more minutes. Now, so counter to what that commission report is saying, those of us who know about Mary Prince know that in her autobiography, based on her first-hand experience of chattel enslavement in Antigua, Barbuda, and Bermuda before being taken to England, she observed the following: since I have been here, I have often wondered how English people can go out into the West Indies and act in such a beastly manner. But when they go to the West Indies, they forget God and all feelings of shame, I think, since they can do such things. They tie us up like hogs, moor us up like cattle, and they lick us so as hogs or cattle or horses never were flogged. And yet they come home and make some good people believe that slaves don't want to get out of slavery. End of that quote. So to conclude, writers of autobiographies, fiction, and historical novels help us to understand the representation of the Caribbean and the actions of colonizers through the discursive lens they use to view the issue of colonialism and its deforming legacies. And they also write about this in relation to life in the UK. As a result of a history of brutality and injustice towards people of African descent, today, what Edward Lidenfeld describes as that indigestible fishbone of slavery still continues to stick in our throats. Indeed, the remnants of this system, called legacies, can be seen across every post-slavery society, where emancipation was followed by a century of racial apartheid, in which stratification impeded the development of race consciousness and Black nationalism. And by the way, the brother who said it wasn't 20 billion compensation is quite correct. He brought in apprenticeship, he is quite correct. I know he was being shouted out, but if you factor in and quantify apprenticeship, we're talking about, according to Professor Beckles, about 47 billion pounds in compensation. Anyway, as the 2023 draft report of the working group stated, and I quote, Denial and refusal to engage in any meaningful dialogue about compensation for historic and ongoing harm flies in the face of the overwhelming evidence of their participation in what several reparation reports have described as crimes against humanity. In this regard, the UK statement to the UN Human Rights Council in October 2022 that the trade and trafficking in enslaved Africans and colonialism caused great suffering to many, but were not at that time violations of international law. Evidence is a shocking example of a culture of denial, given the UK's role in these crimes against humanity and the ongoing legacies of systematized racial atrocity. It cannot be right that reparations are still being refused to the descendants of Africans who live in the UK, who continue to suffer from the legacies, including racial discrimination and psychological harm of the seizure, forced transportation to, and chattel enslavement of their ancestors in the Caribbean. In his 1952 Black Skin, White Mask, Frantz Fanon analyzed the impact of colonialism and its deforming effects and argued that white colonialism imposed an existentially false and degrading existence upon its Black victims to the extent that it demanded their conformity to its distorted values. Well, we no longer are doing that, if some people were doing that. It cannot be right that years after 1948, the Windrush generation, descendants of the 1027 arrivals on June 22, 1948, well-meaning individuals and families who simply answered the call and boarded a ship, what they thought was the mother country in crisis, is still fighting for acceptance, respect, rights, and justice. Justice requires that reparations be paid to people still struggling for rights and respects. And as I said in a March 2022 opinion piece in the Fabian Society, and I'm quoting myself, I guess, while so many countries supporting reparations, with so many countries supporting reparations, the movement has finally achieved greater global visibility. Reparations can no longer be viewed by British political parties as a quiet plea, but one which has momentous support amongst nations with key diplomatic ties to Britain. Moreover, it must be recognized as a plea shared to varying degrees by the entire African diaspora, a community that is often marginalized in political and social discourse. Let's disrupt that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Shepherd, for taking the time to join us today. We are going to move swiftly on to our next speaker, who is Demeke Mekonnen, who is the president of the Global Black Center in Ethiopia. Can we please highlight Mr. Mekonnen? Hello.
Yeah, thank you, Ben.
Good afternoon. Or evening for you by now.
Good afternoon. Yeah, it's clear. Esteemed guests, distinguished colleagues, and advocates for justice, good afternoon. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Good. As we gather to conclude this pivotal reparations conference, I'm filled with optimism and unwavering belief in our collective potential. We stand on the threshold of a transformative movement, one that not only seeks to address past injustice, but also embraces the vibrant future that lies ahead for African peoples everywhere. This conference has been a powerful testament to our resilience and capability. We have come together not only to discuss the urgent need for reparative justice, but to envision a future where the voice and contributions of Black people are celebrated, recognized, and honored. The African Union Declaration for the second decade for people of African descent calls us to action, a call we must answer with courage and determination. The Global Black Center stands proud in this endeavor, committed to uplifting the pillars of history, heritage, and education. Our mission is clear: to confront colonial legacies, to restore our cultural treasure, and to empower our youth with knowledge that inspires them to shape a world that reflects their dreams and aspirations. What we have witnessed today is not just a dialogue, it is a blueprint for our collective agency. We are the architects of our own destiny. The discussions surrounding reparations, decolonization, and accountability have illuminated pathways that empower us to reclaim our narratives and assert our rightful place in history. Let us celebrate the extraordinary potential that resides within our commitments. African ingenuity, creativity, and resilience are forces that can drive change not just in our notions but across the globe. Together, we can harness this potential to foster economic empowerment, cultural pride, and social justice. As we move forward, let us do so with a spirit of hope and unity. We have the power to transform our pain into purpose, our struggle into strength. Let us commit to fostering environments where our youth can thrive, where our culture can flourish, and where our legacies are honored. This is our moment. Together, we can cultivate a future that reflects the richness of our heritage and the brilliance of our potential. Let us carry the spirit of this conference into every corner of our communities, advocating for justice, celebrating our achievements, and challenging the status quo with unwavering resolve. Thank you for your passion, your commitment, and your beliefs in the power of collective action. Together, we are not just rewriting history, we are creating a future filled with hope, dignity, and boundless possibility. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and thank you so much for that final panel that is almost bringing us back into time. As we close, I'm going to hand over to the Secretariat for the APPG for African Reparations. We're very proud to have our Secretariat, the Afford campaign and the Stop the Maangamizi campaign. We're going to ask everybody to be on stage, but I will begin with Onyekachi.
Thank you. It's been a really long day. Lots of very powerful testimony. Just wanted to thank everybody for coming, participating, and 3 years later, making this still a very important gathering for reparations activists, for reparation experts, and those who are passionate about the issues. We are going to be facing very tough times moving forward. We can see all the moves. As I said earlier on, it's not just pretend neo-colonialism. I mean, imperialism is back in a big way. And it's back in an undisguised way. So the work that we're doing now about the past, we should be also making sure that we're keeping the receipts in the present, because there are going to be new campaigns around the crimes that are going to be committed in the present as we move forward. One of the big things that came out today, and perhaps the most poignant thing that I heard, was in a session that we did this morning on ancestral remains, where Elsie Owusu, the architect, was trying to account for why there were Portland stone elements in the decaying castle, one of the castles in Ghana. And she said the reason that there was Portland stone that was used in the castle that came from England was that when the triangular trade was happening, somebody had worked out that you could take the stone as ballast in the ships. And then when you got to Ghana, you unloaded the stones, and then on the trip on the other part of the triangle to the Caribbean, you used humans as the ballast. So they had weighed the amount of ballast that was needed for the ship to get to Ghana. They had weighed the amount of ballast that was used for the ship to get to Ghana, and then human replacement to get to the Caribbean. She's trying to save the castle, which is deteriorating, but that is also the story of ancestral remains and bones, and which needs accounting for. For me, it gave a really powerful story as to why I've been doing this work for nearly 40 years now, and also why we're all gathered here. There's so much expertise in this room. There's so many networks in this room. We're all doing powerful work. But as somebody, I think it was Jacqueline said this morning, if we don't come together and either bring our own chair to the table or create our own table, we will be ignored. So coming away today, one of the things we have to decide to do is to work out how we can make all these networks and all this work that we're doing meaningful so that we can push forward and choose a number of, agendas, 2 or 3, 4 or 5 that we want to achieve in the next year so that when we come back, we've got something to report on. I wanted to, again, just recognize Belle, recognize all the people in the room. Bernie's widow's here at the back. So we spoke a lot about Bernie and the leadership of those who came before. Baroness Howes, all these lights who have, helped us get this far. But this is our time, those in this room. Our networks are international. We need to work out what those minimum demands are and what we're going to insist on for the next year. So please email us, email the APPG with your ideas, and we will do some follow-up meetings to try and get together this kind of coherent vision for where we want to go. So thank you all.
I'll now hand over to Esther from Stop the Maangamizi campaign.
Thank you. It's not been enough time, has it, for us to really even talk to each other, reason with each other, but we recognize this space that we have and the efforts to keep it going. And so thank you all for being here today and for the contributions that you have made or wanted to make, even if they are critical contributions. They are welcome as long as they take us forward in the spirit of iron sharpening iron. So I just wanted to leave with some thoughts in terms of some of the discussions today that are really, really key in how we proceed. I think it's important that we recognize that the struggle for reparations is a struggle about our past in terms of our ancestors, our present, but most importantly, our future. And as African people, however we self-define, wherever we were born on this planet, we are communities of those that are living and those that have passed on and continue to do this work in the ancestral realm. But also, we do what we do because we want to be guaranteed a better future for our children and our children's children. So what's going to be critical going forward is that all of us entering this space, or have been working in this space for decades, or however long you've been working in this space, is that we ourselves honor the best principles of our people in terms of the laws of our people. And I chaired the legal strategies workshop, where we emphasize the importance of recognizing whose law, whose framework, whose justice. African people had law, but because we are trying to fight on their terms, they can constantly say, well, it was legal, we didn't do it, we're not responsible, okay? But even within the notion of what's called international law today, there are some guidelines and principles. Those that are seeking that remedy of law and justice must also do the same in terms of how we engage with our people and our communities. So we've spoken about the UN framework on the right to a remedy and reparations that recognizes full repair as a comprehensive and holistic measure of remedies. But there's also something called the Belfast Guidelines. And they specify that participation of affected communities, that is, those of us who are survivors, because that's what we are. We are the survivors of what some of us refer to as the Maangamizi. So participation must be meaningful, so not tokenistic consultations. It must happen throughout all stages of a reparations process, from design through to implementation and evaluation. It must be informed, so we need to have access to the necessary information about who's doing what and what is being done. It must be voluntary, that is, without coercion, and it must be safe in terms of without reprisals for those who are speaking up. And ultimately, the key thing that we feel can help enforce the best practice in terms of all the 100+ commissions and truth commissions and public inquiries that have happened around these type of issues, what they call transitional justice, is the APSITAJ, that is the All-Party Parliamentary Commission of Inquiry for Truth and Reparatory Justice. And each of you that has a program, okay, if you have a program, it's got the petition on the back here. What you do is you scan this QR code and you get the petition that is being promoted by this APPG for African Reparations, which does mention that Commission of Inquiry for Truth and Reparatory Justice. Now, let me be clear. It is not an end, but it is a means to an end. And what that end is, in terms of what the ultimate proposals on reparations are, can only be determined by you, the people. Yeah, and all of those who are in this room, but also outside of this room. So it will be historic. And for those of us that know anything, it's what we would call administrative reparations. Because no matter what you believe reparations to be, we need to focus on the methodology of how we're going to achieve the objectives that we set. So it's not just about reparations now, it's about reparations how. How are we going to enforce our rights to a remedy and repair? How are we going to harness our people's power to ensure that we get the kind of commission that we want, which will still be a battle, because there are top-down commissions, and we want something that is bottom-up, but also recognizing the contributions of academics and scholar activists working in this field. So we're really leaving us with this goal of trying to secure this commission. But there are some steps that we can take that can help us get there. So first of all, sign the petition that we've spoken about. You can also lobby your MPs. MPs from our community and other MPs, other racialized groups say that African heritage communities, including Caribbean communities, do not lobby them on reparations. That is what they're saying, that we are not actually utilizing, lobbying our MPs or councillors locally across this country on reparations. So we need to be doing more of that. It's important as well that we prepare ourselves for this Commission of Inquiry, because many of you are the case studies. You are the survivors of the legacies of African chattel enslavement, colonialism, and neo-colonialism. We refer to the Maangamizi as a collective term. but we want that evidence coming from you. Your stories matter, and your stories create our story. And we need to change the narrative so that we can be seen and we can be heard in real time. So we're encouraging you to begin documenting your story, your family stories. Not just you as an individual, but call your people together, your family, your group, your faith group, wherever you organize our people so that we are ready to transform the narrative on reparations. We need to have more motions, atonement and reparations motions for the transatlantic trafficking of enslaved Africans being passed across this country, not just in London and Bristol, but we need them in every city. So we're talking about a ground-up, participatory, democratic, or communocratic, as we prefer to say, strategy. These are some of the key things that we can do. But also, part of what we are advocating in the Bristol motion in particular states this, is that whatever we do must be driven by the experiences, the aspiration, the goals of African heritage communities, okay? So what we are encouraging are the development of local plans of alternative progression, what we call Pempamzie plans. Pempamzie is an Adinkra symbol that means to tie together or sew together in readiness, literally our preparation for the reparations that we are seeking to effect and secure by our own people's power. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as I absolutely close, I have to start by thanking our wonderful secretariat. It is they that came to me to launch the all-party parliamentary group for African reparations, and they drive the conference, ensure that the politics of it are rooted in the grassroots, and that is more important than anything else. So we thank you so much. And it's they that also push for the call for the all-party parliamentary commission for truth and reparatory justice. I also want to thank our sponsors, particularly, again, we start always with the Quakers because they allow us to have this building. They may not allow us to have this building if you don't leave quickly, but today they have allowed us to have this building. Lead Day, the Repair Campaign, the Ubele Initiative, Commonwealth, Christian Aid, Stand Up to Racism, Operation Black Vote. You may think that something like this, especially something that attracts as much interest like this, would automatically attract people supporting it to make sure it goes ahead. But it is actually very hard. So to all of those that do support us to make sure that this conference to go ahead, we thank you so very much. And the Global Healing Circle, I'm so sorry, they've come all of the way from America, and we're so very pleased, thank you, and my apologies for leaving you off that list. We are so grateful for your support. I'd like to thank my team and the volunteers for today. My team in particular, because they actually, in order to save costs, produce everything that comes into the conference today, aside from doing their day jobs. And they make it look so effortless and come and spend their Saturday here. So very, very grateful to you, the team, and to the volunteers. And of course, to all of you who have taken the time to attend the conference today. We apologize where things have been running late, but we have been able to get through everything, and very much appreciate that you spend this Saturday here with us discussing the very, very real need for repair and the different ways in which we should be going about achieving it. Do not underestimate how important your contribution to this movement is, and do not underestimate how important it is that you are sharing that, and that you are making sure that, as I said, that we recommit ourselves to remembering that we don't have to ask just simply ask for justice. We have to make sure that we demand it. We do not need permission to demand this justice, and that ultimately there are so many different struggles that I can think of in the past that people said would never ever happen. Whenever I ask for this in Parliament, people say, this is the type of thing, why are you even talking about these particular issues? I've even been called ridiculous at one point in time. But I remind people that there was a time where people said that somebody that looked like me would never be free. And that the country from which my parents come from would always be colonized. So let us remember that these struggles that our ancestors fought, and very much it was them that led their liberation struggles, that they achieved those things in spite of what was done to them. And it is absolutely the time for repair, and we can achieve this. So thank you very much to all of you for being here. And I remind you, thank you, and I remind you again that you do have to leave this building swiftly. And and I don't like to end like that, but I am not even joking. We are far over time, and we do not want to outstay our welcome. Thank you very much. Please have a very, very safe journey home. Thank you.